Have you ever felt like you were being quietly judged, like the air around you shifted just because of who you are or where you chose to sit? Imagine this. A powerful, composed woman steps into a private jet terminal, her every movement deliberate, each step a silent statement of confidence. She carries a single briefcase, its simplicity a subtle reminder of her refined power. She's no ordinary traveler, in the way others subtly adjust their posture as she passes confirms it. But what happens when this same woman with all her quiet strength is suddenly told to move, to give up her rightful place for someone deemed more deserving? It's in these moments, and when power is challenged and dignity is tested, that true character reveals itself. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or asked to step aside when you deserve to stand tall, then this story is for you. Because sometimes the loudest statement isn't a shout. It's a quiet, steady, unshakable stand. The soft glow of the morning sun cast a golden hue across the tarmac, where a line of luxury vehicles idled their engines, humming like a gentle prelude to something grand. A sleek black SUV pulled up to the private jet terminal, and the door opened with a hushed click. Out stepped Naomi Williams, poised, composed, and dressed in tailored navy that whispered elegance without effort. She didn't rush. Her movements were intentional, every step measured like a conductor taking the stage before the first note. The valet, recognizing her, immediately dipped his head in deference and offered to assist, but Naomi gave a polite shake of her head. She carried her own briefcase, just one. It was simple but expensive, like the rest of her. Inside the terminal, the air smelled of fresh espresso and polished marble. Passengers, many already seated in the lounge, stole discreet glances at her. They didn't recognize her face, but they saw the presence. The way she held her gaze, the way the staff subtly adjusted their posture when she walked by. She wasn't just another traveler. As she approached the check-in counter, Grace, the junior attendant, offered a smile filled with both nerves and admiration. She greeted Naomi with a soft voice. "Welcome, Ms. Williams. You're all set. We have you in seat 1A, first-class window." Naomi smiled gently. "Thank you, Grace." From behind the shift in atmosphere came suddenly a sharp click of heels, followed by a voice laced with forced cheer. "I'll take it from here," said Lauren, the lead flight attendant, appearing beside them. Her smile was tight, professional on the surface, but lacking warmth. Her eyes skimmed Naomi quickly, subtly calculating, then dismissing. Naomi turned to her unbothered. "Good morning," Lauren nodded curtly. "Good morning, we'll begin boarding shortly." Naomi stepped aside, sensing the tension but not responding to it. She took a seat in the lounge, her fingers tapping gently against her phone, not texting, just thinking. Calm, unshaken, around her conversations resumed, but something about the interaction had shifted the energy in the room. Moments later, boarding was announced. As passengers began moving toward the jet, Grace approached Naomi again, a small frown shadowing her features. She leaned in and whispered, "Please don't be alarmed," but Lauren made a change. She reassigned your seat, Naomi blinked once, to where seat 4C in business class. Grace replied quietly, clearly uncomfortable. There was a pause, a long, intentional pause. Naomi stood up slowly, smoothing her blazer with care. "Thank you for telling me, Grace." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't protest or cause a scene. Instead, she walked toward the boarding gate with the grace of someone who knew that power was not always loud. It was often quiet, steady, and patient. Sometimes the most impactful moments begin not with outrage, but with silence. And sometimes silence carries the weight of a coming storm. If this moment moved, you don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because stories like this deserve to be seen and heard. Naomi walked down the jet bridge with measured grace, each step echoing faintly against the steel beneath her feet. As she approached the aircraft, the crew stood ready, Grace with a slight bow of her head, Lauren with that same strained smile from earlier, now sharpened by authority. "Seat 4, Lauren announced crisply, gesturing to the second section of the cabin. Naomi paused just inside the entrance, her eyes moving slowly, methodically across the first-class seats. Her original seat 1A sat empty, pristine, untouched. She turned back to Lauren. "I was confirmed in 1A. I have the boarding pass." Lauren's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, but due to a last-minute request from another VIP guest, we've had to make some adjustments." Naomi's voice remained calm. Adjustments that required downgrading a confirmed passenger without notice. Lauren's posture stiffened. It's standard. Occasionally seats are reassigned to accommodate special circumstances. "May I ask who the guest is?" Before Lauren could respond, a woman's voice chimed in from the boarding door. "I'm the guest," said Karen Whitfield, stepping forward, her blonde hair immaculately curled, designer sunglasses perched high despite the indoor lighting. Her tone was sugary but carried an undertone of ownership. "I always fly in 1A. It's practically mine." Naomi's gaze rested on her for a brief moment, reading more than Karen had intended to reveal. Karen turned to Lauren. "Thank you for sorting it out. I simply can't sit anywhere else. You know how important it is to be near the front. Connections timing. People like me can't afford delays?" Lauren nodded, affirming the unspoken hierarchy. Naomi said nothing at first. She simply opened her phone, pulled up her digital confirmation, clearly showing seat 1A, and held it up. "This was my assigned seat. Book paid. Confirmed." Karen glanced at it and shrugged. "Well, I guess mistakes happen." Naomi looked from Karen to Lauren. "This isn't a mistake. It's a decision." Lauren's lips parted, searching for justification. "Ms. Williams, will ensure you receive compensation, a voucher for your inconvenience." Naomi's eyes never wavered. "This isn't about vouchers." Grace, standing silently nearby, seemed to shrink with discomfort. Her eyes darted from Lauren to Naomi and back again. She knew she had seen this happen before, perhaps too often. Naomi turned towards seat 4C. Her steps unhurried, she placed her case into the overhead bin, sat down and fastened her belt. But inside, a fire had already begun to smolder. She wasn't here just as a passenger today. She was here as a mirror, one that was now reflecting the truth, back at those who thought they could erase her with a seat change. The aircraft door sealed shut with a heavy hiss, followed by the muffled click of pressurized silence. Naomi sat upright in seat 4C, her hands calmly folded in her lap. Outside, the world kept spinning, but inside the cabin, time seemed to slow. Moments later, Lauren returned, this time not alone. Beside her stood Trevor, the flight supervisor, clipboard in hand, posture stiff with a certain practice of superiority. His uniform was immaculate, but his eyes scanned Naomi not with courtesy, but with calculation. He approached without greeting. "Ms. Williams correct?" he asked, tone clipped. Naomi met his eyes. "Yes, we've reviewed your booking," Trevor said, glancing briefly at his clipboard, as though the paper held more authority than the person in front of him. "And while we understand your concern, I must emphasize that seat assignments can be modified at the discretion of airline staff." Naomi's expression remained still, modified without explanation, without consent, and in favor of someone else less qualified for the upgrade. Trevor's jaw flexed. "That's not relevant." "It's absolutely relevant," she replied, calm as ever. "Especially when the person being displaced holds a higher tier status in confirmed booking." A faint scoff came from nearby Jessica. Another flight attendant, young, sharply dressed, and standing just behind Trevor, rolled her eyes, then muttered under her breath, "Some people just love to play the victim." Naomi didn't turn to her. She didn't have to. But her voice dropped half a tone. "Excuse me," Jessica straightened. "Nothing, ma'am. I was just saying, this happens all the time. We all deal with inconveniences." Trevor jumped in, shielding Jessica like a loyal lieutenant. "Let's keep this professional." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "Then start acting like professionals." Jessica's mask of politeness cracked just for a second. Her lips curled into something between defiance and disdain. "You're making this into something bigger than it is." "No," Naomi said, eyes locked steady and slow. "You already did that the moment you decided someone like me didn't belong in 1A." Trevor shifted uncomfortably. Jessica tried to recover. "Ma'am, if you have any further issues, you are welcome to file a complaint after the flight." Naomi smiled faintly, the kind of smile that wasn't soft but surgical. "I intend to." Jessica turned away with a sharp breath, muttering something Naomi didn't quite catch. But it didn't matter. She had seen enough to know this wasn't just about a seat. It was about how some people wield uniforms like armor and policy, like a sword cutting down dignity under the guise of procedure. From her seat in business class, Naomi looked forward toward the curtain that now separated her from the front cabin. It wasn't fabric, it was bias. And for the first time that morning, she leaned back in her seat, not in defeat but in reflection. Because what they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly have imagined, was that she had already made a silent decision. This story wasn't going to stay in the cabin. Naomi sat still, but her mind was anything but quiet. From behind the thin curtain, she could hear muffled laughter. Light, careless, entitled Karen Whitfield, the woman who had spoken of connections and priority like they were birthrights, not benefits earned. The woman who smiled at injustice like it was complimentary champagne. And then something caught Naomi's eye. Just ahead across the aisle, the curtain had shifted slightly, left ajar just enough to frame a moment most wouldn't notice. But Naomi saw it. Karen slipping something into Lauren's palm. It was quick, discreet. A folded bilham, high-denomination crisp. Lauren accepted it without hesitation, her hand closing around it with the ease of someone who had done it before. Naomi's chest rose once, then steadied. This wasn't just unethical, it was a transaction, and she had just witnessed it without changing her expression. Naomi slowly reached into her purse, pulled out her phone, and behind the cover of a glossy magazine, hit record. The lens captured it all. Lauren tucking the money into her coat pocket, Karen adjusting her silk scarf with a smug little smile, as if the world had once again rearranged itself just for her comfort. Naomi's hand didn't tremble. Her focus was crystal clear. She angled the camera toward Trevor next, now leaning casually against the bulkhead, chatting with Karen like they were old friends, sharing travel tips, not participants in a deeply flawed act of favoritism and bribery. And all the while, Naomi sat in the seat she was never meant to occupy. Not because she didn't belong in 1A, but because she wasn't expected to speak. Not today, not ever, ever. She turned the phone slightly toward herself, now recording her own face, composed, dignified, and absolutely determined. Her voice was a whisper barely audible in the cabin noise, but it carried centuries of weight. This is for every time someone like me was told to sit down and stay quiet. She ended the recording, saved it to the cloud, backed it up again and again. There would be no erasing this. There would be no denying it. Not this time. Because sometimes power isn't about speaking louder. It's about knowing exactly when to hit record. The silence before the storm was always the most deceptive. Naomi sat quietly, hands folded, eyes on the window as the crew bustled about, pretending everything was fine. But there was tension in the air now. Tight electric, a storm gathering, not outside the plane, but within its polished walls. She didn't have to wait long. Down the aisle came Captain Reynolds, flanked by a uniformed airport security officer, broad-shouldered, walkie, crackling faintly at his hip. His eyes scanned the rows, then locked onto her Ms. Naomi Williams. The captain asked, tone falsely cordial. Naomi turned her head slowly. Yes, I'm going to need you to step off the aircraft with us. There's been a report of non-compliance and disruption. Naomi blinked once, calm, controlled non-compliance. Yes, ma'am, the officer added. You refused a seat reassignment and were recording crew members without consent. That's a violation of our in-flight policy. Naomi took a breath, deep and steady. I was assigned in seat 1A. I was reassigned without cause, and I recorded evidence of an exchange that involved bribery. The captain's smile faded, his eyes narrowed. We're not here to debate, he said flatly. You can take this up with customer service after deboarding. But for now, either you leave voluntarily, or we will escort you off. Around her, passengers had gone still. Phones lowered, eyes wide. The moment was crystallizing and everyone felt it. Naomi reached down, retrieved her briefcase slowly and stood. She didn't argue, she didn't shout. She simply looked the captain square in the eye and said, "You'll regret this." Then without another word, she walked down the aisle, the officer close behind, the hush of judgment chasing her footsteps. As she reached the exit, she passed by Karen lounging in 1A, sipping water with a crooked smile. Hope the next flight treats you better, Karen whispered sweetly. Naomi paused for half a second, then looked her dead in the eye. I hope your next mistake isn't recorded in HD. And with that, she stepped off the plane, not humiliated, not defeated, but sharper, clearer, focused. Because what they didn't know, what none of them realized, was that they had just escorted the wrong person off that plane. A woman whose silence they mistook for weakness. A woman who wasn't just a passenger, but the storm they had just invited into their own cockpit. Outside the aircraft, Naomi walked down the jet bridge with the quiet dignity of someone who refused to let shame attach itself to her shoulders. The guard remained a few paces behind, still alert, as if expecting her to snap. But she didn't have to. At the end of the tunnel, 2 ground agents stood stiffly, arms crossed, expressions tight. Miss Williams, one began, we've received confirmation that your removal was in accordance with federal aviation regulations. The report cites passenger misconduct and unauthorized filming of crew. Naomi raised an eyebrow. Misconduct, yes. The supervisor on board said you were uncooperative, confrontational, and disruptive to the boarding process. Naomi let out a breath, not of exhaustion, but calculation. Interesting, she said, reaching into her blazer pocket and pulling out her phone, because I have the entire interaction recorded, including the bribe that led to the reassignment. She unlocked the screen, opened the video file, and played it volume low, but unmistakably clear, Karen's voice. I always fly in 1A, it's practically mine. Lauren's hand accepting the folded bill. Trevor brushing off her questions like they were inconvenient static. The guard leaned in, watching the footage. The two agents exchanged a look. One of them cleared his throat. Would you be willing to submit this to our legal department? Naomi locked eyes with him. You'll be receiving it from my attorney, along with a formal complaint and evidence chain. And let me be very clear, this isn't just about me. This is about what happens when bias wears a uniform and dares to write the report. The guard stepped back slightly. No longer posturing now, just absorbing. She continued, her voice calm as ever. The irony is, I remained calm the entire time. I followed every instruction. I never once raised my voice. But I'm the one escorted out while your crew continues to smile at bribes like routine gratuities. The second agent suddenly tapped something nervously into his tablet. Naomi finished with a quiet finality. You let them write me into the role of aggressor. But this video, it rewrites the truth, and this time it stays public. She slid the phone back into her pocket, and for the first time since stepping off that plane, she smiled. Not out of joy, but out of justice. Because they had tried to paint her with accusation, but she had walked out with the evidence. And when truth becomes visible, lies begin to unravel. Naomi had just stepped away from the agents when she heard hurried footsteps behind her, heels clicking against polished concrete in a rhythm far too urgent to ignore. Excuse me, Miss Williams. She turned. A young woman no older than 30 approached, smartly dressed in business casual, eyes wide but not with fear. With conviction, Naomi paused. Yes, the woman exhaled clearly, nervous but determined. I saw everything. I was sitting 2 rows behind you in 6A. Naomi studied her face, searching for intent. The woman continued. What they did, it wasn't just wrong. It was disgusting, and I have it all on video, front-facing angle. Karen handing over the money, Trevor brushing you off, everything. For a brief moment, Naomi was silent. Then she asked softly, why did you record it? The woman blinked, because I've seen this happen before. Not always this blatant, but always this quiet. People like us made to feel like we're overreacting when we're simply asking for fairness. I've been there. I just couldn't let it happen again. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. I was going to post it. But then I realized this wasn't just a moment. This is yours. Naomi gently took the phone, played a few seconds, and nodded. The footage was clean, clear, undeniable. What's your name? Naomi asked Danielle. Danielle Ruiz. Danielle, Naomi said, voice low and firm. What you just did, that's courage, and I promise you it won't go unnoticed. Danielle hesitated, then added, if you need me to give a statement or speak out, I will, whatever you need. Naomi smiled, a real one this time. You've already done more than enough. But yes, I may call on you. Danielle looked relieved. She glanced back toward the terminal glass where people were still boarding, oblivious to the storm that had just passed through. Naomi turned her gaze to the runway, her expression sharpening once more. She had entered this morning as a frequent flyer. But now she wasn't walking away. She was taking flight armed with truth, backed by proof, and no longer alone. Because when even one witness stands beside you, the whole world has to pay attention. Naomi stepped outside the terminal, the warm breeze brushing against her skin as the private jet engines roared faintly in the distance. The sun had climbed higher, casting sharp shadows across the pavement, but her own shadow seemed taller now, firmer. She glanced down at her phone, scrolled through her contacts, and tapped one labeled simply L. Carter. Legal, it rang once, then a calm voice answered. Naomi. I need the full legal team mobilized, she said, not missing a beat. Immediate prep for press civil action and FAA filings. There was a pause. Understood. This about the flight, yes. I was forcibly removed. I have footage, 2 angles, one from me, one from a witness, multiple policy violations, bribery, racial profiling, defamation. I'll dispatch the crisis team now. Do you want to go public? Naomi's eyes narrowed. Not yet. First, let corporate feel the weight of silence, the kind that presses into their bones, and the acquisition. Her lawyer asked, quieter now. Naomi smiled, just barely. Still on track, but after today I'm revising the terms. She ended the call and slid the phone back into her bag, then opened a second app encrypted high-level access only. She typed in a short code triggering a series of notifications. Across the city, in a boardroom of Skylux Airlines, multiple executives' phones began buzzing in unison. Incoming memo. Urgent CEO Marcus & Williams Holdings requires immediate contact. Contract status under review. Within minutes, panic would ripple across the airline's top brass, because what had begun as a seat reassignment had just turned into a corporate reckoning. Naomi stood tall at the curb. A sleek black sedan pulled up. No markings, no noise. The back door opened without a word. She entered. Inside, a tablet waited for her with a digital document glowing on screen. Equity Agreement Addendum. Skylux Holdings Merger. She scanned it once, made 2 edits, and signed at the bottom. Naomi R. Williams, Executive Chair, Williams Group, Capital Majority Shareholder, pending acquisition of Skylux Airlines. She leaned back, eyes half closed. They thought they removed a nuisance, she whispered to herself. But they just woke the owner. It took less than 24 hours. By sunrise the next morning, the internet had caught fire. The first video appeared on a mid-sized social justice account, uploaded with the title, "Black Woman Removed from VIP, Seat for White Passenger. Guess what happened next?" By noon, it had over 1-2 million views. By sundown, the hashtags had begun to trend. Seat for sale, bias, in the skies, Skylux scandal. News anchors debated it on national television. Podcasts analyzed frame-by-frame breakdowns. Comment sections turned into courtroom transcripts. And then, the second video dropped. The one from Danielle Clear, closer longer, showing Karen's smug smile, Lauren's palm closing around crisp money, Trevor's indifference in Naomi's silent grace through it all. It wasn't just a scandal anymore. It was a mirror, held up to every person who had ever been told, it's not about race, and in that reflection, Skylux Airlines saw its reputation begin to crumble. Publicly, globally, irreversibly. By midday, a petition demanding the immediate resignation of the flight crew had garnered over 250,000 signatures. Journalists dug deeper, uncovering past complaints, ignored HR reports, and one disturbing stat. Over 73% of first-class complaints at Skylux had come from Black and brown travelers, but less than 2% resulted in action. The cracks turned into fissures. A major travel influencer canceled a Skylux brand deal. A corporate sponsor pulled out of a long-term contract. And then the New York Times published their headline, "Private Jet Power Play, Skylux execs may have removed their next owner." The subheading hit harder. Sources confirmed the woman ejected from seat 1A was Naomi R. Williams, incoming majority shareholder in pending Skylux acquisition. The article dropped like a bomb. Stockholders panicked. Calls surged into investor relations. Employees whispered in break rooms with mouths half open, unable to close them. And inside the Skylux boardroom, silence reigned. Not the polite kind, the deadly kind. Because now everyone was asking one question. Did we just humiliate our next boss? Inside the sleek glass tower of Skylux Airlines' global headquarters, the mood had gone from routine to ruin in a matter of hours. The boardroom, usually filled with smooth-talking executives and quiet confidence, now buzzed with frantic whispers, clinking coffee cups and rapidly vibrating phones. At the head of the table sat Richard Halden, the CEO. His normally tan complexion was pale. He scrolled through the article again on his tablet, as if rereading it might somehow change the outcome. There it was in black and white. Naomi R. Williams, CEO of Williams Group Capital, confirmed to hold a 45% acquisition stake in Skylux Airlines pending final approval next quarter. Next to it, a still frame of the video, Naomi being escorted down the aisle calm as ever, while Karen lounged in one, sipping water. She's our investor, someone croaked from across the table. Richard didn't answer because he didn't need to. Everyone in the room had already seen the documents, the silent NDAs, the quiet negotiation updates from legal, the coded emails marked confidential, holding structure WGC. She walked in and didn't say anything, whispered Claire from Investor Relations. She didn't even tell the crew who she was. She didn't have to said Marcus from Legal Tone Dry. She gave them a chance to behave like professionals. They failed, and now asked someone from her trembling, what can we do? Richard exhaled sharply and stood, his voice colder than usual. We do what we should have done yesterday. We apologize. We take accountability and we prepare. For what Claire asked, Richard looked toward the massive window where planes took off and landed in the distance, unaware that their parent company was spiraling. For a regime change, he turned to the room. You don't humiliate the woman signing your checks and expect her to forget. Naomi Williams doesn't scream, she doesn't threaten, she doesn't demand headlines. He picked up the Times article and dropped it onto the table with a heavy thud. She just waits until it's hers. And then she rewrites everything. No one spoke after that, because in that boardroom of power players and polished reputations, they all understood one thing. This wasn't just a crisis, it was a coronation, and the throne was already engraved with her name. The following morning, every top executive at Skylux received a calendar invite titled simply, Emergency Review, Internal Leadership Summit, Mandatory Time, 10, E0EM location, Executive Boardroom, 52nd floor host N. Williams, not PR, not legal, and, Williams, they arrived early. Silent, caffeinated, terrified. At 10:02, the elevator doors slid open and Naomi Williams stepped into the boardroom. Not with a storm, but with stillness. Her presence alone shifted the air. No entourage, no legal team. Just a slim black tablet under her arm and a voice that didn't ask for silence, it commanded it. She walked to the head of the table, the seat that used to belong to Halden, and stood there for a long moment, eyes sweeping the room. Some couldn't meet her gaze. Others stared too hard, hoping to decode her intention before she spoke. Finally, she did. Before we begin, Naomi said evenly, I want you to see what your culture looks like from 24B. She tapped the tablet. The lights dimmed, the screen lit up, and the room was forced to watch Karen's voice. I always fly in 1A. It's practically mine. Lauren's hand folding crisp money into her pocket. Trevor's voice dismissing concerns without a flicker of thought. Jessica's eye roll, her muttered victim. The moment Naomi was escorted off, calm, dignified, surrounded by uniformed arrogance. And then the last frame, her whisper into the phone camera. This is for every time someone like me was told to sit down and stay quiet. The screen had faded to black. The silence was suffocating. Naomi didn't sit. She didn't need to. She just looked around the table and said, now that we've seen the truth, let's discuss the consequences. No one moved. No one breathed too loudly. Naomi stood at the head of the table, not raising her voice, not pacing, not needing theatrics. Just truth and truth. When unfiltered, made men squirm harder than threats ever could. She slid the tablet flat on the table. Then she spoke each word deliberate, measured like a scalpel. You now have two options, she said. Option one, you take full responsibility. Immediate termination of all involved crew. Public acknowledgement of systemic failure and a full review of hiring and training practices with external oversight. She paused. Let the weight settle. Option two. I pull my investment, withdraw the acquisition, liquidate my holdings, and go public with everything. A beat of silence. Then she added sharper now, including the internal emails I've seen from your HR department covering similar complaints over the past 5 years. Richard Halden swallowed hard. Naomi turned slightly toward him. You see, Mr. Halden, this isn't just about what happened to me. It's about what's been happening for years. I was just the one with the camera, the connections and the name. She leaned in, not threatening but undeniable. You built an empire assuming no one important would ever be on the receiving end of your culture. Another pause. And now that someone was, your entire foundation is exposed. A hand trembled near the edge of the table, someone trying to hold their coffee, still. Naomi took one final breath, then straightened. You have 10 minutes to decide. After that, I make my call, and the world watches, either your integrity or your collapse. Then she walked out, leaving them alone, with the truth and a ticking clock. The door hadn't even fully closed behind Naomi when the room erupted, not with voices, but with urgency. Legal whispered frantically to HR/PR, tapped furiously at her phone, already drafting apology templates. Richard Halden sat still, eyes glued to the blank screen where Naomi's face had just been. He didn't need a vote. They all knew the answer. 10 minutes passed. At minute 11, Naomi returned. No word, just silence, waiting to see what they had chosen. Richard stood buttoning his blazer with the kind of stiff formality that couldn't hide the tremor in his hand. We've made a decision, he said. Naomi arched a brow. The crew involved Jessica Morales, Trevor Allen, Lauren Matthews, and Captain Reynolds will be terminated, effective immediately. Internal memos will go out today. A formal press release will follow within the hour. And the rest, Naomi asked, voice quiet but razor sharp. Richard swallowed. a full external audit. We'll issue public apologies, implement third-party training. You'll oversee the reform. Naomi gave the slightest nod. That's a start. Outside the boardroom, emails began to fly. By noon, employees across departments received one-line internal alerts. The following individuals are no longer employed by Skylux Airlines, effective immediately. Some cheered silently. Others whispered in hallways, but most simply sat back in awe. Because for once, the consequence didn't fall on the quiet passenger in 4C. It fell on the ones who thought uniforms made them untouchable. And across social media, screenshots of the termination memo began circulating, followed by the trending headline, Skylux fires entire crew in viral discrimination scandal after learning passenger was incoming. But this wasn't just a firing, it was a signal that the days of brushing injustice under plush carpets and platinum cards were ending. And Naomi, she didn't need to gloat. Her power had spoken for itself. Now it was the world's turn to listen. By evening, the news had spread far beyond aviation. Trevor's name was trending, not in celebration, but condemnation. Former Skylux supervisor, fired after bribery video. Goes viral, the headline read. His LinkedIn profile was flooded with angry comments and brutal reposts. Recruiters withdrew offers. Friends turned quiet, and that once proud inbox full of job inquiries now filled with silence. Jessica Morales. Once the picture of polished professionalism, now sat alone in her apartment. Phone screen cracked, tears dried against her cheek. Her social feeds, once curated with flight selfies and motivational quotes, were now a battlefield of backlash. She tried to explain it to her parents. It wasn't what it looked like, she whispered over the phone. But even she didn't believe it anymore. Lauren, she vanished from the internet within hours, accounts deleted, profiles scrubbed. But it was too late. The internet never forgets. And Captain Reynolds, the one who had escorted Naomi off with barely a glance, had his pilot's license placed under urgent review by the FAA. All four of them found themselves in the same position they once forced others into. Unwelcome, unheard, and unbelievable. But the hardest part, it wasn't the media or the lost jobs, it was the mirror. Because no one had shouted at them, no one dragged them down. They had written their own ending. One clipped comment, one smug nod, one folded bill at a time. And now they sat in the stillness of consequence. Not canceled, accountable. And as the world moved forward with Naomi's name now etched into Skylux's future, they remained behind. Not because someone locked them out, but because their own actions burned the bridge they never thought they'd need again. A week later, Naomi returned, same airport, same terminal, same airline. But this time she wasn't escorted out. She was greeted. As she stepped through the polished glass doors, employees stood a little straighter. Some nodded, some whispered her name. Others simply watched in quiet awe, unsure how to act around someone who had once been humiliated in silence and had now rewritten the rules. At the check-in desk, a young attendant stammered, "Ms. Williams, it's an honor. Your seat 1A has been reserved." "Of course," Naomi offered a kind smile. "Thank you. But today I'd like to board last." The attendant blinked, confused. "Last," Naomi nodded. "I want to see who's boarding. I want to see how they're treated. That's where the real flight begins." She waited near the back of the lounge, watching passengers of every background move through the gates, this time with dignity. No glances, no whispered judgments, just boarding passes and respect. And then, just as the final call sounded, a woman approached her. Middle-aged, worn eyes, a Skylux cleaning badge clipped to her shirt. She hesitated before speaking. "Ma'am," she said softly, "I was working the day it happened. I saw how they looked at you. I saw how you walked out, head high." Naomi looked up. The woman's eyes glistened. "And now you're here, same place. But everything feels different." Naomi's smile warmed. "That's the goal." As she walked down the jet bridge, passengers moved aside, not out of fear, but recognition. This time no one offered to take her seat. No one dared. Because they knew who she was now. Not just in title, but in truth. And as she sat in 1A, finally she looked around the cabin, filled with quiet respect. Naomi didn't need applause. She didn't need headlines. She just needed this. A flight where everyone boarded like they mattered. And as the plane lifted gently into the clouds, she closed her eyes. Not from exhaustion, but peace. Because sometimes the real victory is being seen. Months had passed, and Skylux was no longer the airline it once was. The old policies, the hidden bias, the silent gatekeeping, The unwritten rules of who belongs had been stripped down one by one. In their place, transparency dashboards, equity training led by third parties, and a new motto embossed on every gate display. Respect isn't an upgrade, it's the default. At the heart of it all stood Naomi, not in photo ops, not behind podiums, but in the rooms where real change is born, boardrooms, break rooms, and one-on-one mentorship sessions with young employees who now saw leadership through a new lens. She launched the Clear Skies Initiative, a program designed to reintegrate former employees who had been terminated for misconduct, but who expressed a genuine desire to learn, grow, and make amends. And yes, even Jessica, Trevor, and Lauren applied. Not all were accepted, but those who were faced Naomi in a room with no cameras, no press, just accountability. "I'm not here to humiliate you," she told them. "I'm here to ask who you choose to become now that the curtain's been pulled back." Jessica wept, Trevor nodded silently. Shame written across his face like a confession he couldn't erase. Lauren just sat still. But even that silence felt different now. Less pride, more processing. In Naomi, she didn't seek revenge, she offered responsibility. In the years that followed, Skylux became an industry case study, not in scandal, but in recovery. Colleges taught the Williams Doctrine in ethics classes. A TED Talk titled "The Woman in 4C" reached 12 million views. And when asked once what she would have done differently if she could go back, Naomi answered simply, "Nothing, because I needed to be unseen." Before they could finally see everything wrong with the way we fly, then she smiled. "The seat didn't define me, but how I stood when they took it. That's the story I came to tell."